Tonight's invention has been used as a weapon of war and a weapon of peace. It's taken men to the edge of space, it's ruined the economy of Skegness, and it's made your lunch a lot more interesting. Best of all, though, it's brought me here to paradise. So a round of applause then for the noisiest invention of them all, the jet. People used to think of the world as quite a big place, but now it's tiny. Took me longer to drive the other day from Manchester to London than it takes to fly from London to New York. I am about to embark on a journey right round the world, and I'm not Michael Palin. I'm not going to take 80 days about it. I'm going to do it in 5. Yep. It's been decided that the best way to show you the impact of the jet is to use one to fly me 25,000 miles round the world in just over 120 hours. I'm not sure that this kind of insane schedule is what our forebears had in mind when they first dreamed of taking to the air. Escaping the Earth by flying like the birds is one of the oldest human fantasies. It looks easy, but it isn't. If a seagull can manage it, then surely a human could with all that power and intellect. Clearly not. The fact is that man-powered flight is simply never going to happen. For one thing, our hearts would have to thrash away at 800 beats per minute. We just aren't natural flyers. Sorry. I'm not looking forward to this. It's 6:30 in the morning. I'm in a bad temper, and they have just given me my schedule. Hand on heart, first time I've seen it. London, New York. New York, Los Angeles, which I loathe with a passion. Los Angeles to Tahiti. Tahiti? Things are looking up. Tahiti to We're going to somewhere called and then to Auckland. Old girlfriend of mine lives there. Things are looking up again. Auckland to Sydney, ghastly place, full of Australians. Sydney to Singapore. Singapore to London, and that's 55 hours of DVT, rubbish food, quite a lot of it in America, and back. I'm going to need some nicotine patches. But before all that, the first leg of my journey, the train to Heathrow. Before planes, trains brought mass transport to Britain. In 1841, you used to be able to go to places as exotic as Loughborough. But you try catching a train to... There were no powered planes, leave alone jets, until 1903. When the Wright brothers abandoned flapping in favour of engines, it was a good move. Wilbur and Orville's machine actually flew, only for 1/4 mile in 4 hops, but it didn't matter. Powered flight had begun. It wasn't until 1919 that the first passenger service started between London and Paris. It cost £21, it took 2.5 hours, and it wasn't what you'd call comfortable, since you were flying in a convertible. An ex-RAF bomber with 2 seats and no roof. Nor was it very successful. The flight was half empty, taking just 1 passenger. Planes soon got larger and less al fresco, but still flying was slow and comparatively expensive.
In 1939, when Pan Am started transatlantic flights, they charged £200 a ticket, around £3,000 in today's money. And for your £3,000, you got a 24-hour flight and no guarantees. With their hundreds of moving parts, engines often broke down. One early flight was 120 hours late. Oh, those were the days.
Hi.
How can I help?
Thanks. Yeah, I'm flying to here.
Okay. And do you have any bags to check in with us today?
Terminal 4, Heathrow, my ultimate destination. Just 5 days to go.
Upstairs window seat would be brilliant. And preferably not next to anyone who's fat.
Okay, I'll have a look at that for you.
And this is to New York.
This is to New York, boarding at gate number 20. It's about a 15 minutes leisurely walk to the gate. Figure yourself.
Where's
enough
gate
time.
1?
Gate 1 is through the security area. On
Is
your
there a
left.
gate 1?
There is a gate 1A, gate 1B.
Because I've never flown, ever, in 20 years from gate
Gate
1.
1.
Ever.
Oh, I'm afraid you'd have to wait another year, maybe, to travel through gate 1.
Right, so this is gate
This is
274,000.
gate number 20. Thank you.
Now, the jet, of course, is a British invention, something we can be proud of, something we gave to the world. Trouble is, we really did give it to the world. We invented it, and we gave it away for nothing.
Just 25 years after the Wright brothers had stumbled into the sky, a young man called Frank Whittle came up with the idea for the jet engine. It would become his life's work, but achieving his dream would also destroy him. Invention and chasing dreams was in his blood. Frank's father was an engineer with a penchant for perpetual motion machines. Whittle's obsession with flight began at the age of 9. An aeroplane with engine trouble made a forced landing near his home. Frank was fascinated. He became so absorbed he didn't even notice the pilot preparing to take off again, and avoided decapitation by inches. But he was hooked. Desperate to be a pilot, he applied to join the RAF, but he was turned down because he was too short. Luckily for the world, 6 months later when he tried again, young Frank had shot up to the crucial entry-level height of 5'3", and he was in. So, age 16, the diminutive Whittle was installed as an apprentice at RAF Cranwell. He soon had a reputation as a brilliant pilot and a daredevil stunt performer, though the top brass preferred to call it overconfidence. But Whittle was not simply an entertaining flyer. In 1928, when he was just 21, he wrote a paper entitled Future Developments in Aircraft Design. Dull title, brilliant idea. Whittle envisioned planes travelling at 500 miles an hour. This was extraordinary. At the time, the maximum speed was just 150 miles an hour, and what was more, Whittle was suggesting abandoning the propeller and its piston engine altogether in favour of something entirely new: the jet.
With a propeller engine, you have tubes and wires and carburetors, and it's all terribly complicated. But with a jet, you don't have any of that. You don't have anything at all. It's just empty. Man pushes a button, lots of noise, you're going 500 miles an hour. Personally, I think it's witchcraft.
Fortunately, however, Whittle knew more about physics than I do.
Ah, Whittle. Welcome. Where is
And in September 1929 took his idea to A.A. Griffith, director of the Air Ministry Laboratory.
So, about your proposal for a jet engine. I've looked into these ideas myself. Personally, I don't think it's possible to build an engine without a propeller. But do explain to me. Perhaps I've missed something.
Very well.
Griffith almost certainly understood what Whittle was going on about, but he saw Whittle's ideas as a threat.
The air enters here and is squeezed by the compressor. Then, fuel is pumped into the combustion chamber and mixed with the compressed air. The burning mixture, at about 800 degrees, exits out the back and creates plenty of thrust. At the same time, hot gas spins the turbine blades, which are linked to the compressor.
And there is the problem, you see. There isn't an alloy in the world that can withstand the kind of temperature you'll have in that turbine. The blades will simply melt.
But I'm sure suitable alloys can be developed.
Not for decades, if at all. How fast will a plane go with one of these engines pushing it along?
Faster than any plane today. 500 miles per hour is in easy reach. If you look at my calculations,
You made a mistake. The thrust of the jet would be half what you estimated. So even if the engine could be built, it would never get itself off the ground. Never mind, drive a plane at 500 miles an hour.
Sir, I believe in the jet engine.
I'm sure you do, Whittle. But it's totally impracticable.
Griffith, in fact, was working on his own version of the jet, but his version still had a propeller. He was only halfway there. The result was, though, that Whittle was not given any government backing to develop his ideas. But he was determined, so he found himself some private backers and got the jet patented. In 1936, he set up a company to develop the jet. But it was by then 7 years since he'd first put forward the idea, years in which his patent and the details were freely available to everyone. The first successful jet-powered flight took place in 1939, but Whittle wasn't involved. The world teetered on the brink of the Second World War, and the world-beating new plane was German.
So, the first plane ever to fly with one of these spooky engines was the Heinkel, which had been designed by a man called Hans von Ohain. Great.
Luckily, there was one big drawback with the Heinkel HE-178. It could only fly for 6 minutes before the whole engine needed rebuilding. A brave attempt then, but not exactly a practical flying machine. Just days after von Ohain's flight, Hitler invaded Poland, and with the stakes raised, the British government finally realized jet fighters might be useful after all. Finally, Whittle had real backing. And so, 10 years after proposing the jet, a prototype was built. And just 2 years later, in 1941, a new jet plane, the Gloucester, was ready. Trials were hampered by bad weather, and many, even the test pilot, were doubtful the plane would ever get off the ground. But finally, on the evening of the 15th of May 1941 at RAF Cranwell, the first ever British jet plane clawed its way into the sky. This is the actual moment, and an amateur cameraman recorded the event, which went without a hitch. In its first 17 minutes aloft, this little Gloucester soared to 30,000 feet and baffled local residents.
Well, I just come down to do my usual spot of gardening after tea. Was going along merrily and heard the whistling noise. Couldn't think what it was. Looked up and saw a plane coming. When it got overhead, I noticed there wasn't a propeller. So I downed tools and ran in the house to tell everybody I'd seen an aeroplane without a propeller. Of course, nobody believed me.
Whittle's jet plane had a top speed of 370 miles an hour, the same as the Spitfire. But soon, jet planes were able to fly almost twice as fast as their piston-engined ancestors. Whittle's sums had been right all along, and the jet age was almost underway. If Whittle had taken a royalty on every jet engine ever made, which is something he was entitled to do, well, you can forget the Sainsbury's and the Rousings and the Duke of Westminster. He would have been rich beyond the dreams of avarice. But he gave it all away for the greater good. Or rather, the British government took it away and gave it to Rover. Yup, some visionary in the Air Ministry decided to take responsibility for developing the jet away from Whittle, who knew what he was doing, and give it to a company that didn't. Rover made a complete mess of it and put the jet engine, rather predictably, in a car. Luckily for us, the Germans were just as inept. It wasn't until 1944 that they were able to produce jet-powered fighters. Too little, too late. The war was all but over. The struggle to bring his jet to life had taken its toll on Whittle. He suffered a mental breakdown and was discharged from the RAF. He died in 1996. Gate 20. My quest is at an end, at the end of the tunnel. There's no light, but there is my gate. Frank Whittle may no longer be around, but his invention has thrived. It is now going to whisk me across the Atlantic to New York, and then on to Los Angeles, and then a quick, well, slightly quick hop across the Pacific to Tahiti, and then the homeward leg through Auckland, Sydney, and via Singapore back to London. My first flight to New York will take around 7 hours. 7 hours on a plane. 7 hours. Shall I have another vat of champagne? Right, I've been on the go now for 6 hours, and I must say I'm giving serious thought to joining the Mile High Club. I just had the stupidest dream. I dreamt I'd accepted an invitation to fly around the world in 5 days. As you can probably tell, I'm bored. And that's because in my day, when I was growing up, you used to be able to get across the Atlantic in 3 hours. Now, it takes more than twice that.
Britain's aircraft industry may have a winner in the Comet.
Before Concorde, there was a plane named after a heavenly body best known for falling in a huge fireball into the ground. Yet at the start it all looked so hopeful. The vision was that ordinary people would benefit from the white heat of Whittle's technology.
The first commercial jet service across the Atlantic is established, and BOAC are flying it.
Introduced in 1952, the Comet was not only fast, quiet and comfortable, it was very, very cool. It symbolized the dawn of a new age in passenger aviation. What fascinates me most of all, though, about those early days is the passengers. Because these guys woke up one morning and found that they could have breakfast in Saint-Tropez and lunch in St. Moritz, and then, if they wanted it, dinner in St. Albans. As a result of that, the idle rich got themselves a new name. The Jet Set.
We gotta get out of this place.
The celebrity jet set elite, Hollywood stars like Elizabeth Taylor, knew that the jet was a perfect photo opportunity, conveying in a single image the essence of glamour and glitz. Even today, people like Joan Collins and Liz Hurley have used flying first class as a way to establish their Hollywood credentials.
Now, my girl, you're so young and...
But just as the jet set was getting started, it all went wrong for the Comet.
This is the tragic scene of the Comet disaster near Calcutta. Wreckage of the aircraft smashed almost beyond recognition.
In 1953, Britain's jet-age trailblazer started falling out of the skies. In just 13 months, 4 comets came crashing to Earth, killing 110 people. The problem was tragically simple. The Comet had square windows, and the corners were weak points. Over time, as the plane's cabin was pressurized and depressurized for every flight, fine cracks developed around the corners of the windows, eventually becoming so big that the planes simply blew apart in mid-air.
And that really was the end of Britain's involvement with mainstream passenger aviation. The future was to be found through the American round window.
Driving up and down the same old strip. I gotta find a new place where the kids are.
During the war, the British government had very kindly given Whittle's jet engine design to America in exchange for ammunition and equipment. And the Americans repaid us by taking over what was left of our commercial jet industry. By the late 1950s, the Comet had been redesigned, but it was too late. The Americans had cornered the market with the Boeing 707. The jet the whole world wanted to fly. Carrying 143 people at up to 600 miles an hour, it was twice as fast as propeller planes and twice as large as the Comet. It was a chap called One Trip, boss of the American airline Pan Am, who brought the first Boeing 707s. Tripp believed the jet would make air travel available to everyone. And one of the first places he flew his 707s from was New York, where I've just arrived.
Tripp was the Richard Branson of his day. He saw a world where you'd arrive at JFK with swollen feet and gritty eyes, where you'd spend 2 hours checking in for a flight and then 3 hours clearing customs. He envisaged a future where everyone was wearing a T-shirt bearing a slogan saying they'd been somewhere else.
London and New York, the world's leading financial centres, were now only 7 hours apart, and people made the journey in their thousands. The 707 was the final nail in the coffin of the piston engine. Just 9 707s could do the work of 25 propeller planes.
Talking that street talk. You're the heart and soul of New York City.
Autumn in New York.
Great. It seems the British weather has also made its way across the Atlantic.
So inviting.
It was the 707 that fused the twin economic giants of New York and London, and even today they're still joined at the hip. You've got 28 flights a day and 10,000 people shuttling back and forth between the two cities. I feel very at home here somehow, much more so than I do in any other city in America. Can't think why.
They're making me feel.
You can now cross the Atlantic as quickly and as cheaply as going by train from London to Aberdeen. It's little wonder we call the Atlantic the pond.
When are we going to That's what I want to know.
It's autumn in New York.
They say a week is a long time in politics, but the likes of President Kennedy realized they could make a week last longer by jetting around the world. Shuttle diplomacy was born. It was Henry Kissinger who coined the term in 1973 when he jetted between Egypt and Israel as he brokered the Middle East peace treaty after the Yom Kippur War. The trouble is that shuttle diplomacy has rarely worked. But when it doesn't, you still need a jet.
Whoa! We just did climb 17,000 feet in 11 seconds. Oh, it's made me feel ill again.
You're gonna go down. Okay, take the airplane.
No, it's no good. I'm gonna throw up again. Sorry.
Now I've done my fair share of flying around in fighter planes. Been there, done that, vomited on the t-shirt, and now look at me. I'm too fat and poncy to do them again.
Chris just told me the last chap he flew with threw up 11 times. I'm only on twice.
You wanna do a loop?
You do a loop.
Never, ever, ever again. Jet planes come and go, but there's one that has stood the test of time like no other. The massive B-52. It was a B-52 that dropped the first hydrogen bomb on Bikini Atoll in 1956, escalating the Cold War. During the Vietnam conflict, B-52s flew 124,000 missions and dropped over 5,500 million pounds of bombs. Ultimately, they didn't change the outcome of that particular war, but they did keep it going for longer. If all the bombing by B-52s didn't change the world, then it certainly wasn't for a lack of trying. Today, the Americans have just 94 of the 744 B-52s that were built. 300 were destroyed in 1991 as the superpowers retreated from one another's throats. They were chopped up in the desert in full view of Russian satellites. But although the fleet is depleted, the B-52 is still very much a fighting force. These B-52s at Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana may have been built in the early 1960s, but they're still in service. The B-52 is a truly jaw-dropping aircraft. Its wings are so heavily laden with weapons and fuel they need their own wheels. During the Cold War, the biggest bomber in the world was the iconic emblem of America's military might. Its crews on constant standby to counter the communist plot for world domination.
Power's looking good. Roger. Offense, defense, you ready for crew report? Offense, ready for crew report.
The Reds may be gone, but the bombers are still ready, because you never know when you might need one. The B-52 was used in the recent Iraq conflict, and they're due to remain in service, astonishingly, until 2045.
Right, it's 4 o'clock in the morning, and I can see clearly now the rain is gone. I can see all the obstacles in my way. And the main obstacle is that I'm going to spend the next 5 hours on an American airline with its nasty food and its bossy stewardesses. Great.
And here we see the reality of flying today. Queuing JFK in the middle of August, it's a nightmare.
Very well, thanks. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Okay, name's Clarkson.
You have to queue for the check-in, queue for the security for a very long time, you even have to queue for coffee. Travel today seems to be defeating the point of the jet. I've got a 5-hour flight ahead of me to Los Angeles, and it's taken me 4 hours to get here to the gate. Very long way from the glory days.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. This is your captain. Welcome to the jet age. We're cruising now.
Flying in the 60s was something you dressed up for. It was very expensive, very exclusive, and there were no queues. But for the jet to really have an impact, it needed to become something that everyone could use. Step forward Pan Am's One Trip again. Trip got Boeing to design a monster, something to cope with the rising passenger demand, and they gave him the biggest commercial plane in the world. The Boeing 747.
Come closer and listen. The beat of my heart keeps on missing. I notice it most when we're kissing. Come closer and love me tonight. That's right.
1969 was a momentous year. Neil Armstrong walked on the moon, Britain abolished capital punishment, Lulu won the Eurovision Song Contest with Boom Bang a Bang, and on February the 9th, the Boeing 747 took its first flight.
The first ever Boeing 747 is now seeing out its days in a car park in Seattle. Its chief designer, Joe Sutter, is the man who turned Trip's grand concept into a plane that could actually fly.
The airplane was designed as a freighter as well as a passenger airplane. We wanted to have the airplane efficient for loading and unloading on the ground so we could keep the airplane in the air. We wanted 2 doors, and one of the doors we put on the nose of the airplane. So we had to put the cockpit above the main deck, and that's what produced the hump. We had some space behind the cockpit because of the hump, and everybody wondered what to do with it. Some people thought we'd use it for crew rest, but Juan Trippe, who believed in carrying passengers and giving them the best ride he could, he decided first to use it as a dining room, but then people realized we could put paying seats up there, so it's proved to be a good economic part of the airplane.
The 747 is one of the most complex engineering projects ever completed, with over 6 million moving parts. When the cabin is pressurized, the air increases weight by a whole ton. This plane is seriously huge. The Wright brothers' first flight could have been done in the economy section alone. If it were not for the fact that the wings would shear off while turning over, the 747 could, in theory, fly upside down. In the late 1960s, the 747 was not the only major aircraft project, though. In Europe, Concorde was the vision of the future. Everyone thought we'd all end up flying supersonic, but today, Concorde is gathering dust while there are over 1,000 747s flying, and they're still building more. Five hours down the line, different time zone, different temperature, different everything.
That was an extraordinary flight because come over the Rockies, and then you've got probably 2 hours of flying over nothing. And of course, sitting up there with nothing else to do, I was thinking, what on earth possessed the early travellers who pushed west across America to keep going to a rocky escarpment and think, no, 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 let's soldier on, let's get to that next rocky escarpment, and then the next rocky escarpment. There's nothing down there, nothing. And then look what you get to on the other side.
Everybody comes to Hollywood. They wanna make it in the neighborhood. They like the smell of it in Hollywood. How could it hurt you when it looked so good?
If you read about Los Angeles or saw it in a film, you'd think, oh, come on. But because of the Jet, you can come here and say, yes, it is that silly. Doesn't bother me, though, because I'm out of here.
Los Angeles is just a springboard, in fact, to my next destination, Tahiti.
120. 120. That's down here. You go left at Utah, all the way up through Salt Lake City, along here to Denver, right at Chicago, through Texas, and there's the gate. Great.
Planes like the 747 have massive wingspans, which means gates have to be spaced far apart from one another, and that's what creates the long, long walks. And then when you finally make it for your 8-hour flight to the South Pacific, there's nowhere to rest your legs.
The EU says that a crate carrying a veal calf has to be big enough for the animal to be able to turn round and groom itself. Now, there are lots of people who wave placards and get jolly cross saying that that's cruel. And yet, these are the same people who sit here for hour after hour after hour in abject misery to go on holiday. I'd rather be a veal. I'd love to claim that I am going to spend the rest of the flight here, but I'm not.
There are a few ways in which jet travel can still be glamorous. Using Concorde was good, and having your own plane would be pretty smart. But a flower from Tahiti stuck behind your ear doesn't really do it for me.
I'd rather go to Skegness, to be honest. Of course, there is a third way that flying can be glamorous. At the check-in desk, get on your knees and beg, shamelessly prostitute yourself, but get yourself upgraded. Look at this. Look at this.
There was so much space, in fact, that for the first time in my life I actually got some sleep on a plane. And when I woke up, they'd moved me even further forwards.
Sadly, after the events of September the 11th, it's no longer possible to just go and visit the flight deck and see how a plane works. But then, of course, when you leave America and go back into the free world, anything's possible. There's Tahiti.
$100. 4,000 miles on from LA, Tahiti is just one of many island paradises to have been lassoed by civilization's big, shiny bird. Thanks entirely to the jet, getting away from it all has never been easier or cheaper. So cheap and easy, in fact, that Tahiti is crammed full of people getting away from it all. get away from them, we're off to the neighbouring, soon-to-be-ruined island paradise of Muur, which is pronounced by the locals as Muur. Of course, before the invention of the jet, people from the rest of the world did come to these islands. They just got here rather more slowly. We think we're very clever being able to get here in 21 hours from London, and I'm sure Captain Cook was jolly pleased with himself when he sailed here in just 7 months. Cook arrived in Tahiti in 1768 on his way to Australia. The locals gave him and his men food and shelter, and were rewarded with syphilis. As you can imagine, this went down very badly indeed, so when Cook dropped in on his way back home, they killed him. This is a breathtakingly beautiful part of the world. The mutiny on the Bounty had much to do with its crew not wanting to leave. It's only recently, though, that people other than empire builders, botanists and mutineers have been able to experience it for themselves.
Dependable double-deck luxury flying boat, positive mines of interesting information. You'll fly at sightseeing level by the Phoenix Group.
The airport here opened in 1960 at about the same time the jet age started. And today, Tahiti is completely dependent on its annual delivered crop of 230,000 foreign tourists. But it's all wrong. Muur is an all-inclusive South Seas theme park. For a small supplement, you can swim with a dolphin in the hotel pool. It's paradise with a very small p indeed. Though I'm hardly taking the time to immerse myself in local culture either. Here today, gone tomorrow. Got a plane to catch. It's not just tourism that has been changed by the jet. Our diets have been transformed. Not long ago, a decent meal meant going abroad. Now the jet brings abroad to us. Tuna no longer comes only in tins, and mange tout are available all year round. Pointless things like kumquats and starfruit are common currency, thanks to the jet. Oh, and jets carry a huge amount of frozen horse semen too, for racehorse breeders. With all those dead fish, overweight tourists and equine sperm flying around the globe, there are lots of planes in the sky. Let me give you an idea of how many. For 3 days after the World Trade Center thing, all civil aviation was banned from American airspace. And in that short period of time, the weather actually changed. The days were 1 degree hotter, and the nights were 1 degree cooler. The vapor trails from jets form artificial clouds which hold in heat and raise ground temperatures. It's certainly got the environmentalists very het up, and jet proliferation has raised other concerns. That is a very big sky, but it isn't big enough. Collision. It happens rarely, but when it does, it's generally a news story. Like this crash in July 2002 between a Russian Tupolev and a Boeing 757 cargo plane. It's an even better news story, though, when it involves lots of people. Of course, dying in a plane crash is hugely spectacular, partly because of the fireball and the horror, but mostly because it's so rare. Between 1990 and 1999, British Airlines carried 700 million passengers on 7 million flights, and not one of them died in a crash. That's a whole decade, and no one was killed. According to official government statistics, you are more likely to be killed by your trousers. Time to leave Tahiti. Apparently it's 6:30 in the morning, though as far as I'm concerned it could be 12-ish. My body clock is completely broken. This is the homeward leg, but there's 33 more hours of flying and 11 hours of sitting in airports. Now, the good thing about Tahiti's airport is that it's really not much more than a landing strip, so there's no 25-minute stroll to the gate. All I've done these past 3 or 4 days, or however long it's been, is sit in a chair. But you wouldn't believe how many ailments I've managed to pick up. I've got a pounding headache, my wrist hurts, my hip hurts, I've got skin like cardboard, I've got acne for the first time since I was 14. Also, I'm a middle-aged man, a little bit out of shape. And so as a result, I think it's likely that the veins in my legs will be full of lumps like space hoppers. Then there's the business of my fellow passengers who, well, they look a bit contagious. Before jet travel, it might have taken a new disease decades to cross the world. Now, it takes days. It was thanks to the jet that the SARS virus became a worldwide epidemic. Started in China and then reached Hong Kong, where infected passengers boarding international flights spread the disease internationally. Worldwide panic, all down to the jet. And SARS isn't that dangerous. If a seriously bad bug like Ebola ever finds its way onto an aircraft, then we really will have something to worry about. Auckland, New Zealand, one of my favourite places on earth. An old girlfriend of mine had the good sense to move here. But there's no time to visit, we're only stopping for a couple of hours.
Didn't get very far.
I am now completely bewildered. I don't know whether I want a glass of port or a plate of bacon and eggs. It was pouring with rain in New York, it was summer in Los Angeles, now it's the middle of winter in New Zealand, and Thursday never happened. Disappeared completely. And there's another thing too. Since I left England, 4 nights have happened there, but I've only seen 3 sunsets. I have to say, of all the inventions we're looking at in this series, the jet engine is the one that the human being has just not really adapted to at all. We just can't keep up with it. Well, I can't. I feel terrible.
It's lucid as hell.
And that's it. Farewell to New Zealand, a country which I love. But I'm on my way to Australia, which I sort of don't love at all. I don't believe it. Gate 1. Gate 1. Of course, I'm not flying from it. On this flight, I plan to see if technology can provide anything to make flying more bearable. There are a number of products on the market which are supposed to help with kind of the illnesses and the jet lag that you get on a plane. I've got this sort of squidgy exercise thing for my feet, which keeps the circulation going. I've got an ionizer around my neck. I've got this watch around my wrist, which gives me electric shocks from time to time. And you may have noticed I've got headphones on, which are cancelling out the noise of the plane. They're very good, actually. Very good. It's very quiet in here. I remember this peaked cap, which is shining bright lights in my eyes, which I can adjust.
like so. I think all these things were probably invented by the Germans in the Second World War. Bright lights, sensory deprivation, electric shocks. It's just given me one, actually. And another. Okay, I'll tell you anything. We're coming in at 6 from the east. Ooh, 40 planes. Oh. I'm gay. All right, I admit it, I'm gay. I cheated in my shorthand exam at journalism college. I'm sorry. I never got 110 words a minute. That is Sydney Harbour Bridge, and that is the Opera House. And that means I'm in Australia now. This is the country that gave us Home and Away and Neighbours and Rolf Harris. This is home to the funnel web spider and the box jellyfish. So, taxi! Marvellous. Airport, please. We're currently flying along at 38,000 feet, which means we're a little closer to God, so I hope he hears this. Why? Why have you allowed us to go backwards? Why? Why haven't we got Concorde? If we'd have been in Concorde now, I'd have been at home playing with the kids instead of flying along over Nizhny Novgorod, wherever the hell that is. Now Concorde is grounded, it becomes a museum piece like no other. Because unlike steam trains or Ford Mustangs, there's nothing that has superseded it. We're not looking at Concorde as an example of outdated technology, it is still at the cutting edge. Losing it has been one giant leap backwards for mankind.
Sail the sky, the bring it on.
It's all about size from now on. Latest offering, it's going to make this Boeing 747 look like a chicken McNugget, drawing its inspiration from the QE2 rather than Concorde, the new Airbus A380. Well, it's going to be the first superliner of the skies. For the last 30 years, the Americans have dominated the skies with the Boeing 747. But the jumbo's supremacy is under threat from the colossal Airbus A380. The European new boy will be bigger and more economical to run than the 747. It'll carry up to 555 passengers, 150 more than the Boeing. The A380 also sees Britain hanging on to a last sliver of the aviation industry. Its massive 45-metre wings and its engines will be built in Blighty. So, we've had 100 years of powered flight and 70 years of the jet, and now it seems we're stuck, building variations on a theme, waiting for the next Frank Whittle to come along and show us the way forwards. Whittle's genius was to replace the hundreds of moving parts in the piston engine with just one in the jet. But the future of aviation may well depend on an engine with no moving parts at all. NASA has been experimenting with the idea of scramjets since the 1960s. The scramjet uses its own forward motion to compress and then burn fuel to create incredible thrust, flying at 10 times the speed of sound. As always, there are quite a few hurdles to overcome, but the scramjet could one day allow us to travel from Sydney to London in 2 hours. It's taken me 23.
The jet has spread disease around the world and has been responsible for the overdevelopment of tourist destinations. Flying itself is an increasingly miserable affair with cramped conditions and now, sadly, the threat of terrorism. On the other hand, though, what's the point of living on a planet as rich and as diverse as ours if we can't explore it? If nothing else, the jet has given us the means to do just that. Our knowledge and understanding of other countries and cultures has come on in leaps and bounds in the past 50 years. Our horizons are now global.
There are those who say that the jet has shrunk the world. But after the journey I've just done, let me assure you, it hasn't. What it's done is shown us just how big the world really is.
And next Thursday, Jeremy reveals a story of greed, opportunism and blind chance that led to the invention of the telephone. That's at the same time, 8 o'clock here on BBC Two.